this is like the one thing that really separates the architects and the urban designers and planners. There's this simple concept that Moughtin highlights in chapter 3 is that, let me just quote here, there are two main concepts for designing a town or city. A town or city is visualized as an open landscape onto which buildings are placed. That's the first one. The second one is a town or city is a three-dimensional block where public space, streets, and squares are carved out. So that's a bit abstract, so I think I need to use a drawing here. Uh, if my Photoshop loads. Come on, Photoshop. The heck? I need to double click it. That's why. So the first concept is that the what they call this, the towns and cities are built or are created based on the shapes of the buildings in that town or city. So let's get, I don't want to freeze my computer. It's been a bit laggy lately. Let's do like 120 DPI. Okay. So first concept, Control Shift N. Okay, let's say red. Okay, let's red. This is the traditional concept. This is the architect's way of thinking. So let's see, be concept 1. That's too big. Concept 1. This is buildings as the main element in cities. I won't write it down because you're taking too much time. So for example, you have a city, you have like a grid. Let's say that's a road. And let's say, wait, maybe let's do it like this. Road, have another road here. And what defines the cities according to like the way we've been trained as architects, come on, okay, is that the giver or the main design element are the buildings. So let me change the buildings to blue here. So that's the base of the building. You have your buildings there, buildings. So you create cities by creating buildings. Da, 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 da. So you have building here, you have a tall building there, short building here, parking lot over there. This is concept 1. Concept 2, B, C, X, red. Concept 2, I don't know why my 1 looks like a 2 over here. I'm just like conscious about that. Concept 2 is streets or public space as the main element. And then for the sake of like saving canvas space, like on the page, I will draw it beside here. I don't want to confuse you guys. I'll just draw it down here. So the way Moughtin describes it is a city is designed like a sculpture. So imagine a block, and this is like the building heights, and you carve out the streets. So I am going to like take my imaginary knife here, and then carve out a street. So now, everywhere you imagine like you're cutting a cake and you're carving out a piece, every piece that you cut creates a new street. So this will be a new street over here, new street over here. So that's basically the second sort of concept on like how cities are built. So you're starting out with a block. The building heights are here. So I'll just call that BHL or just BH, the building height limits. And then you design the streets by carving out like which is the best way to connect separate areas in the city. And then there is this idea that building height should be constant or shouldn't be like irregular. And this again connects to what we discussed in our design class before as enclosure. So the enclosed space is this chunk here. So for example, you draw a street. Let's say this is the sidewalk. This is like another sidewalk, and just cutting it in section. And then you have the facade of the building over here and another facade of the building over here. And then this is sort of like an imaginary like area limit, probably defined by the eaves of the building. And then of course this is the ground itself. So that's like the road right of way over there. So we're looking at it as if the carved out space, the streets, is the main element versus here where the buildings are what we're looking at. The buildings are the main sort of design focus and the streets are kind of just there. So I make a building here. The way we design our buildings in our design class, you have a lot, let's say our like our hotel lot is like that, and I'm just gonna design my building here because I'm gonna maximize the floor plan because that's what my teachers say. Well, that is true. You also need to consider what's going on beyond your lot. Like for example, if you zoom out a bit, you have your FLB building here, FLB. You have Metro Ayala here, Metro. And then you have a series of small hotels and shops over here and a bigger hotel over here, so shops. So, and then you have, this will be Lausanne Avenue. I'll just call it Luzon. And this is Bohol. And this is Archbishop Reyes. And then this is the, I think the BPI building over here. And this is a right turn to somewhere. And this is another building over here. So if the street was the main element of the design, I'm just going to draw on top of it. Let's color it red again. If the street was the main element of the design, you would be thinking about what I said earlier in my design classes, how the enclosure would fit or how to create a sense of enclosure in this area. So we think of it as a 3D space, and we just redraw that over here. Redraw Bohol Avenue over here. So this is BOHOL, and this is ARCHI, Reyes. And then basically the block that you're carving out is, all is over there. Lauzon is over here. And then we have the small shops over here. Have the big hotel over here. You have a big, another like business hotel over here. And then you have Metro Ayala, kind of like this-ish, because it's perspective. So I'll just be looking at it from this side. So the technical block that you're carving out from is defined by these buildings. So let me just draw some broken lines over here, broken lines over here, broken lines. And this is like Ayala over here. It's a bit shorter. And this is the broken line over here. So instead of thinking about, I'll make a building shape, a building block, and putting it on top of the site, try thinking about the reference points around your site. Like this is the, back to red, this is the height of the commercial area H. This is the height of another hotel. This is the FLB height. And this is Metro, the height of like the Metro building, HEIGHT. And that should help you create a more sort of context sensitive, a more community-based design. And then you'll be looking at how do the streets fit in. So you carve out your sidewalk over here, sidewalk over here. How do people get inside your building? And then the form of your building will be related to these like building heights. So maybe your podium will be the same level as Metro Ayala and the surrounding buildings. And then your hotel height will be the same as the FLB height. So now it kind of like fits better into the site. Although you still end up with a similar looking form, but your thinking is different. You're approaching it from a different direction. And hopefully that will lead to a better design. Even though at this point it looks like a typical like L-shaped hotel block. But that's basically this concept, the two concepts that Moughtin describes here. So for more detail on that, you can read the reference book. But in summary, concept one, Moughtin describes the buildings of the city as the positive elements. Whereas concept two, the street is the positive or the main element. Any questions on that? Last time I discussed this, there are a lot of like question about it. So hopefully this makes it a lot more clearer, like the difference between building positive and street positive. So, any questions? If no questions, I'll proceed to the next point. All this like towns and buildings. Okay, seems like oh wait, saving as PDF. Seems like there are no questions. I'll just save this as Photoshop, towns and buildings. Okay. So this is just one idea of like how urban design can influence architecture. If you have like any other reference books, we can like talk about that. So let's go to the next part here. The different methods of to create like a pleasing urban design composition. So number one, buildings in landscape. So buildings of great individuality can be placed close together. Oh, sorry. When placed close together are almost certain to conflict or like have conflict. Such buildings need space around them so they can be appreciated as unique compositions. The building standing in isolation within a landscape is appreciated the same way as a sculpture. That is by walking around it and viewing it from all sides. Excuse me. And then within this sort of concept or composition, there are two models. The informal model, which shows free sculptural forms, which give maximum flexibility to internal planning, which conforms to and changes, this supposedly changes the landscape setting. And then there's the formal model, the classical model, disciplined adherence to symmetrical arrangement of internal space. So in the simplest terms, the informal model means the more kanang Frank Gehry-esque buildings, and the formal model means the more classical, like Roman-inspired buildings. So let's take a look at that. I'll save these for later. Um, I think one famous example would be the museum at Bilbao, Museum Bilbao in Spain. Let's see here. I hope it gets me the right. Oh, it just shows me like the museum. I think it's called the Guggenheim. Yeah, there we go. Guggenheim. Ah, there it is. I never mind. I won't search. It's here. So, how can buildings influence the landscape? So, if you have a building like this, for example, the Frank Gehry Guggenheim Museum, it really looks a lot better, or you can appreciate it more if you give it a lot of open space around it. So notice it's irregular, it's informal, but also notice that the open space is very generous. So there's like a walking path around it. In fact, the people who visit the museum are encouraged to follow this path around it. So I'm here. There's like a path. The entry to the museum is down here. Oops, it's not letting me go down there. Eh, eh. Okay, this is the entrance to the museum. So you don't even, there's no like direct door. You're like appreciating the space from multiple angles. There's a ramp down here that goes behind the building. There's another ramp up here that goes around the reflective surface, the more like sort of, what do you call this? Organic shape of the building, the free form shape of the building. And notice that it's facing the river. So people on the boats, people from across the river can appreciate the architecture. So if you're going to do something dramatic, make sure that you provide enough space so the people can actually appreciate your building. This is sort of kind of an issue in Philippine architecture. Let me close this down. I think I need that for later. Let's look at Ayala Center, Cebu. So we have some very dramatic looking buildings. Very is a strong word. They have some dramatic buildings in Cebu City. So let's say one of the newer buildings also featured in Lantawan is the Montage Building over here next to Elizabeth Hotel, I think. Yeah, I think it's updated. So look at that. Can anyone in the class sort of let me know if you've seen this building, like while you were, I don't know, maybe traveling in Cebu City? Anyone? Okay, we got one. Nice. Yes, go ahead, Ciara. Okay. Oh, okay. Just raising your hand. Okay. Good. Thank you for the participation. That really, I really appreciate that. So notice it's a very not normal building shape. And if you stand here, it looks nice, but I feel like it would have been better if I could stand here. I could see the whole thing. It could be also like Google Maps, but in a way, because it's the only sort of informal building in this setting, it stands out more. And I think it also manages to create the sense of enclosure by mimicking the building heights. And yeah, like what do you guys think? Oh wait, let me put I can now use a poll. Do you think this is a good design or not? Do you think the montage building is a good design? Have yes, and let's have no. Um, I'm a bit leading the discussion towards yes, but you can totally disagree with me. And then I would like to know I'd like to know your reasoning why, because I'm just using this as an example to highlight this methods of composition. So this building, the montage building, would fall under the informal model, but it would have been better if it had more space to breathe, basically. So I guess even Moughtin disagrees with me. So I think it's good, but yeah, it would have been a lot better if there was more breathing room between the space. Like it seems like it's different just for the sake of being different, and it doesn't fit the context as well. According to Moughtin, what we say as an informal building composition. So you can see it a bit over here, and it's unfortunate that this side where we have a lot of viewing space, it's basically the back of the building. But I guess here you can see it actually looks good from here too. It kind of fits this building as well. So I think the architect was also thinking about that. Um, was it Brother Bella interviewed the, or wait, or was it another architect? But yeah. So what are your thoughts? Let's see the answer of the poll. Oh, I didn't launch it. Sorry, my bad. I forgot to launch it. Please answer yes or no. There are no right or wrong answers, but I would like to get one representative from the yes and one representative from the no. And of course, you will get participation points for that. So compared to like this section of Ayala, it's a bit more what Moughtin would call a classical or like a formal model where all the buildings look the same or like have like a similar motif. This is not inherently a bad thing. In fact, I think Moughtin like appreciates this. And I think some urban planners and architects would also appreciate this as a good design. The only issue here is that they didn't really manage like on this axis here, like going down this street, the sense of enclosure is very weak. Like just if you do this, you do this, you're not even looking at the buildings anymore. Even the trees, the types of trees are not the same. Palm trees in the middle, different kinds of trees on the sidewalks. The sidewalks have like similar length, so that's good. And then the treatment of the storefronts are different as well. Like this is like a more close to the sidewalk storefront. This one, the storefront is interrupted by a driveway. So just like this section, this view, the sense of enclosure isn't very good. And though it's a bit unfair to compare it to Rome, let's look at a random street section in Rome that sort of like has that similar situation without it being like a major tourist destination. Maybe this one. It's unfair. It's like fully pedestrianized. So it's a really totally different setting. But the sense of enclosure is very strong. The buildings are of the same height, even though where the sense of enclosure becomes weak, that you don't have a storefront on the opposite end. And really, I think it's not really required for me personally to have everything symmetrical. Um, I'll bring up Moughtin's example here, just for like another example as to what he thinks a good composition would be like. So let me skip to chapter 3. Where's chapter 3? Chapter 3 is page 63. Ah, boy. Let's just say page 70. duh, 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 duh. So the example he has here is, yeah, I have it. It's the same example in the canvas. Um, for an informal building, this is not, I couldn't include this in canvas because there are like too many images already. He gives the example of the Ronchamp Chapel. So if you finish Archist, this is the chapel designed by Le Corbusier. And notice that it's located in a vast open landscape, and then the church is of an irregular form. The formal example here is, let's see here. He mentions, zooming in, the Tempietto of Saint Peter in designed by Bramante. I think this is also in Rome, or if not, like Venice. A cottage in Chipping Campden. I think this is an example of like a building in a landscape that has a more formal form. So Tempietto over here, and then over here is Hampstead Gardens, suburban London. So something like that. So as another example, I'll bring you to this is um, the Steep Hill Street. That's actually the name of the street, Steep Hill. And you see the images here, but I think it would be much more appreciated if we go to it like through Google Maps. Steep Hill Street, London. Is that right? Is it London? No, let's see here. I'll just search this because it's a lot better. Here we go. Let's go and see the street that has a very good sort of composition. Okay. So this is what I mean by it doesn't have to be symmetrical or the same exactly, but at least the main things to create enclosure are similar building heights and then the proportion of the street to the building height. So let me just take the snapshot over here, save, snapshot one, and let's compare that to Ayala again. Let's say Ayala, Cebu, close to our um, project site for design. So now everyone should be in the preliminary design phase, like getting those details done. So where am I? Here. Let's go down here. It's 3:28. I think we still have enough time. I'll try to finish by before 4 so that you won't be so pressured. So let's take this street, for example, Bohol Avenue. And let's take also Archbishop Reyes, snapshot 2. Okay, like that. Okay. Let's do that. Save snapshot 3. And then do. I think I can close the downtown Cebu because I thought I would need it, but we're just gonna focus on our design site. And then snapshot 3. Okay, save. Snapshot 4. Okay. So let's take a walk down Hill Street. So where is the big? We'll start at the big church. Where's the big church? Where did it go? Oh, there it is. So Hill Street, there should be another church here. Hang on, let me orient myself. Let's see. So it's from the Lincoln Cathedral down to the Jew's house. It's basically I'm not sure why it's called the Jew's house. It could have something to do with World War II. Let's see here. Is this the Lincoln Cathedral? Oh, there's the Lincoln Cathedral. So we start all the way, I think, here. But I think an aerial view would be better to like orient ourselves. So this is a Lincoln Cathedral, 11th century Gothic church, and this is Steep Hill Street. So notice it's a bit irregular. It doesn't have to be symmetrical. It doesn't have to be rigid, a straight street. You can have curved streets, and it goes all the way down here to, let's say, let's stop at here. I think the Curiosity Shop. I think the Jew house is somewhere over there as well. So let's take a walk down the street. So we start here. We have the church there, and then you have the street over here. So notice white building, white building. White building with green sort of accent colors, white building with black accent colors. brick house, not brick building. I'm not sure if that's actually a house. The sidewalk is the sidewalks are there, and the road is very small, very thin. I think this is pedestrian only. Oh no, it's actually not. There's actually cars who go down here or who use the street. Going down again, which way? Oh wait, I went off Steep Hill Street. So going down here, whoops. You see white building, brick building with like a red brick building. So I'm just emphasizing that doesn't have to be symmetrical. Brick building, another brick building to the left, white, like a painted white building on the right, brick building on the left. Sort of a change in directions for the path. And then brick building, sort of like I think firewall. And then like a lower, or like a low elevation or low height fence. Well, it's kind of high in comparison to the people, but compared to this building, it's a lot lower in height. Trees to the left, White House on the right, brick wall on the left, brick house on the right, brick house on the left. So as you can clearly see, it's not symmetrical. The thing that's always constant is that they attempt to regulate the height. So the height is more or less similar, but not exactly the same. So this is, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. This is talking about the buildings of simple geometric shape and also the actual compositions, and I think a bit of the spatial compositions as well, but we'll discuss that further. So why, let's see, let's check the answer here. So a lot of you say yes. So the building itself, like me as well, I would agree with that. It looks good. We have only one person who voted no. If you want to participate, can that person who voted no please tell me why you said no?
Good afternoon, sir.
Sige, go ahead.
I voted no, sir, kaya kanang when I look at the building, like, okay raman siya ang form, pero
Mm,
like, especially on the second floor, like, I like the way na green, I like na green elements sa second floor, but
mm,
it could have been extended to the upper floors with ang mga green elements. So, mo ang reason ng ni-vote ko no.
So more of the building again. Oh, okay, okay. That's very fair. So just to highlight to the class, let me go back to montage over here. Yeah, it is a fact that the sort of garden wall only happens here, like in the first maybe like 5 floors, and then they stop. And there are like several reasons for this: maintenance, the price of like getting the plants here. But it does look very strange. Like, why did they even put it here if they only put it in this place? And wala lagi continue all the way to the top. You might find your answers in the newest issue of Lantawan, so please read Lantawan. So nag-plug lang po Lantawan. So very, very valid opinion there. Thank you for that, Gabriel. It has been noted on my notes here. So I will add that to your class records. Okay. Now let's have another poll. I really love doing polls here. So next is, do you think the steep hill street path is a good place to walk slash visit? Yes or no again? Yes and no. Dave. Oh, while you're answering that, Launch, let's get a representative from the Montage Building who said yes. This will also go to your like class records. So for those under me, I am very like I try to do my best with like recording class records or class participation. So anyone from the yes who wants to volunteer?
Good afternoon, sir.
Okay, Asiara, go ahead.
Sir, I think the building looks very nice and unique, like in Cebu. That's why I voted yes. But then, I think it's a conditional yes also because like, when you showed the Guggenheim museum,
Mm-hmm.
like I could like see like how a huge like open space can help you appreciate the building even more, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what the montage really lacks because like when you view the montage, like in different angles. Like if you're just like walking, then you can't really appreciate it kayo. Like you can only appreciate it when you're like from afar, or like if you're in a building and then like you can see it. Yeah, like you can
Mm,
see it at like very like the same height. But then if you're just on the street, um you can't really say like, oh, this building is so beautiful, like
yeah.
because it's so tall, and then there's really not enough space for you to view it properly because it's being blocked by all the other buildings and the
Mm,
vegetation and trees. Yeah, that's
mm.
all. Say.
Okay, very good. Very good. Exactly. So that is why in the previous chapter we talked about the elements of design. So proportion of the street, which I will do now, proportion of the street and the building heights really play a crucial role to how your building is sort of experience. And I get that from my previous classes. They want to create experiential architecture, blah blah blah. So it sounds so good, like like when you say it, but how do you sort of do that like in practice? So let's see, we have Hill Street here, and then we have our design over here, our design lot. I wanted to say site, but in the middle of saying site, I was thinking about the word lot, so it just came out as sot. So this is Lauzon Avenue, Bohol Avenue, and let's make this the same height. And over here is ah, ah, Archbishop Reyes. So I just want to emphasize that this is just one way of creating design. This isn't the only way, because like as we all know, design is subjective, but you can sort of make a better case for your design if you have like if you base it on existing principles and technique. So you can be more convincing not only during your thesis defense but in your actual practice. So you convince your client, now we do this because so and so theory, so and so principle say that this looks good, and then you can provide examples to your client, because half the time the client has a vision in their head. I want my building to look like this, I want my house to look like this, and they have like their vision is very hazy, like for the most part, because they're not architecturally trained. They might have sample houses, but you can help make their vision more clear by providing even more houses, even more experiences, and your own architectural perspective. So this is just one sort of tool you can use to create quote unquote good design. So let's take a look at Hill Street over here. I already saw like a lot of people say it looks like a very nice place to visit. It's very safe looking, it's very homey. So what is creating that sense of safeness and hominess that looks very attractive? So number one of the biggest things that Moughtin would like to describe, oh crap, I missed the layer again, is the street to building height proportion. So we'll discuss this further when we get to streets. So notice this length over here, L, and this height over here. I'll do that, H. And then if you squint a bit because of the perspective, it almost looks like the street length is more or less the same as the building height. So this would be a proportion of one street length, which includes a sidewalk, 1L, 1L, I'll just call it street length, SL, equal to 1 BH, building height. So it creates that, again, sense of enclosure without being completely symmetrical. So it's applied all throughout from where we started at the church all the way down to like when we got to like this part, like this intersection. So now maybe you could apply that thinking to your design in design class. So notice that this is the building height here. This is the what do you call this, street width over here. So let's call this SL, street length. Oh, no, no. Why do I call it length? I mean width. Let me width, W. So going across. Okay, street width, and then the BH, the building height. So just looking at this part of Bohol Street, you have a street width of about, let's say the street width is 1, and let's say the building height's about, so that would be, let's make a 45-degree angle here, something like that. So maybe it looks like 1.3 or 1.5 the building height, just proportion-wise. And then let's look at Lauzon Street or Lausanne Avenue. And then we have another proportion, which again highlights how if you do it like this, oh wait, was my thing not writing? Am I on the wrong layer? Ah, okay. I need to bring it up. There we go. So in Lausanne Avenue, this is very interesting because you could tackle the sort of proportions in two ways. You can look at this proportion over here, or you can look at this proportion. Sorry, not straight, like that. So this SW street width is within another bigger street width over here. So let's call this SW2. Then this is not a building height, but let's just say a street height, SH, because it's just trees, there's no building, is kind of defined by another, like, what do you call this, plant vegetation over here. So we call that SH. And then another building height over here, BH. And then this is like a proposed building height over here, BH. And this proportion pretty much looks like, if I do a 45-degree angle here, about twice the street length if you look at the bigger one, the wider street. So we say SW2. Okay, this is getting a bit confusing because I'm using numbers. Equal to 2 times the BH. So now we're like doing math now. Now it looks like I'm teaching math. But on the smaller scale one, SW, we'll just call it SW1, is more or less equal to, or even wider than the street height here. If we follow the trees, if you see my mouse or like my brushes, so let's say about a bit half, so 0.5 SH. So this is where you can think about proportion, scale, and bring it into your design. So for this particular avenue, to create a sense of enclosure, you could probably use this one over here, or you can use, let me change color, this one, this sort of street width to building height proportion. So this is one proportion, this is another proportion. And which one you choose, that's up to you. And then finally, Archbishop Reyes, I'll just call it AR Avenue or street. You have this very clear street width here and sort of an inconsistent building height. So sometimes it's this tall, sometimes it's that tall. So let's just say BH is this building over here, and there's no BH here because there's no building. Let's just call it like street height over here. But notice if I draw a 45-degree angle, kind of like 45-degree angle, it looks like it's 1:1. So SW street width more or less equals to building height in this area. Now, if you look at all three sides or all three streets, you have different building heights to street widths. And this makes it abundantly clear that the street isn't the main element of this area. It's really the buildings. So the buildings have different heights. The widths of the street are sort of like constant, but the building heights are different. And then it creates this weird proportion that doesn't really make it look united, and it looks very messy. And of course, you also have the electric wires on top. So that even adds to the mess. So to create this sense of enclosure, you need to choose one reference point, whether it be Bohol Street, Lauzon Avenue, or Archbishop Reyes, and then you stick with it. You apply it throughout your building so you can create sort of this unified walking path, or like a unified like park or whatever, whatever you're going to put in your design. As long as you have like some benchmark, you can apply this principle of enclosure, starting from either Bohol, Lauzon, or Archbishop Reyes Avenue, and then that will like make your building, quote unquote, look better. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me check the poll here. So most people said yes. Only one person said no, and I'm very interested to say why one person said no. Could the person who said no, please speak up? Why did you say no? Hello? Margula si no. We'll just get back to that. For those who said yes, who would like to volunteer? Or nag-process pa sa... Yep.
Uh, Good afternoon, sir. It's me again. Is that
Ah,
all right? Or you'll
okay
get
ra.
chance to another one, sir?
Okay ra, because I'm waiting for the person who said no to come forward. But
Okay, sir. Um, I think it's a good place to walk or visit kay the buildings aren't like monumental. I mean they're
mm,
not too high and then it just feels like you're in like a homey neighborhood.
mm,
Like it's not and then it's also like very pedestrian friendly because I don't really see any roads for cars. So it's
mm.
more like people oriented, not vehicle oriented. Yeah.
Okay, yes. There are actually some cars who go by here, but it's very rare. You don't see it a lot, like especially just a because the thing that took these pictures is actually someone on a car, the Google Maps car. But yeah, it looks very quiet, very calm, which some people might think is a negative. It's really at that point it becomes very subjective. Like, what do you think a good street looks like? You have some cars over there, a truck, and the church over here. So hopefully the person who said no will come up. Like if you're the same person, okay na po, your points, your participation will still be graded. And as we looked at last week, balik na punta sa Rome, these streets with like people walking on them, they also like allow cars too. Like let's see this forward a bit. Oh no, ads. Nescafe Gold. Come on. Let me go back to Rome. Okay, there we go. So if we go forward a bit here, you can see a car drive by here. So this car is going into the street where we're just walking. You see some parking spaces here. But as Ciara said, this area of Rome is really just for pedestrians with some access for the cars. So this makes it like more friendly, and also I'll share you a report more detail later on. This pedestrian activity actually increases economic activity. So the shops are getting more people in them, they're selling more stuff, and the shops, because they are built in like what they call this, basically because how shops work, you need to pay taxes. The government is also getting benefits from this pedestrian activity, which of course they use to maintain the streets. The I think there's still corruption in Rome, but it's not as sort of rampant. So you can see taxpayer money being put to good use. So that's like the ideal situation. Okay, so it's already 3:49. Let me just go through the other elements sort of a bit faster. So buildings of simple geometric shape. Buildings having simple geometric volumes, when placed together, can present to a viewer a unified composition, provided that certain conditions are met. So what are those conditions? Sufficient space, the dynamic nature of the way the way building groups of this type are appreciated requires sufficient space around the buildings so that every changing composition is seen from many viewpoints. So what does that mean? Basically, setback. So this is why setback is very important. Here in Rome, the buildings are limited to like 4 stories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories, I guess. And if we go a bit forward, let's say in this area, the buildings don't go higher than the specific monument. So this is the Trevi Fountain in Rome. It's sort of the highlight of the space, and the buildings don't overpower it. Whereas in Ayala, it's basically free for all. I'll build a taller building than you, blah blah blah. I'll build this over here because I can without any relation to anything because there's nothing here. There's no regulation. There's no guidance. There's no plan. Basically, it's all ad hoc. But which in some ways can be good, but in this situation is uh, very clearly not good for the public space. Okay, so that's what Moughtin means by having sufficient space. So setback to appreciate the building. And like what your classmate said earlier, because the Montage building is so tall and has such a short setback, like even if I stand here, I can't see the whole building. I have to really tilt my head all the way up to appreciate it. And at this angle, maybe it was intentional that the architect wanted it to look like this, but it's really hard to appreciate if you're just standing here. So that like depends. So this one, so the vertical lines, your building doesn't look what they call this as good if you look at it like this. Like it's basically looking at a person from like a very bad angle. So that's what Moughtin means here by sufficient space. Architectural treatment is exactly what it means. What are the architectural elements, window types, um, eaves length, sort of design style. And then finally, a composition with buildings of simple geometric shape need a dominating building, basically a focal point. And this is what's happening here in the Trevi Fountain. The Trevi Fountain is the focal point, the star of the space. And every other building is supporting that space. Now, when you do your design in this space, do you want your building to be the focal point? Do you want it to be a supporting building? I think in the design brief, it's supposed to be the focal point. So how do you create a focal point here? I think very easily, you just make a very dynamic looking building. How do you make it like dynamic? It could be, you want a very like abstract form. You want it to have very big glass windows, very sort of, the Montage building would have looked a lot better if it was on this lot, basically. Okay, it's 5 minutes, 7 minutes to 4. Right angle. So buildings retain a three-dimensional quality, that is, they remain as plastic solid forms resting on a two-dimensional floor plane, but in this case, they are related in plan by the right angle, and all horizontal lines vanish to common points. Walking around the group, the buildings are appreciated as solid form, but order is maintained by the firm spatial anchor of identical vanishing points. So we can't really see this here in what do you call this? Ayala, sorry, my brain blanked. Because the buildings, what do you call this? Although it could be, I think it could be. I think it's not very apparent here in Ayala because there's so much like gaps between buildings. It's more apparent here in Rome, where like the buildings are closer together and they're arranged perpendicularly. So a way that Moughtin sort of like gets a bit poetic. So he's saying here right angle. He basically means the building should be arranged parallel or perpendicularly. So if you go to the book over here, which I encourage you to read in your own spare time, let's see here, right angles. The right angle principle or the perpendicular principle looks a bit like this. So this is a development, a like residential project in London. So Churchill Gardens. Let's look at that very quickly. I think we need to continue on Monday this discussion. So let's look at Churchill Gardens over here. So notice simple geometric buildings, repetitive architectural elements, creating a unified space and arranged in right angles. So parallel, perpendicular, basically all the effects of the right angle. They don't look like this, where you have Ayala here, basically the main element. I have circular composition here. You have whatever is going on here in the Security Bank, City Sports Club. I think 3D would be better so we can see. So there is no apparent order in the Ayala Business Center. It's basically you get a block, you build whatever you want. No reference to anything existing, no reference to anything that might be built later. So it looks like a mess. I'm trying to think of a word that's not too strong, like a messy, but it really is messy. Also, you have the informal settlements. I think these are formal settlements, just very low quality and very dense. So if you look at it, I think these are still formal settlements. I think this is a row house over here. Row house. this actually looks very decent. And again, because of the way buildings are like the built the building industry in the Philippines is, with like the wealthiest dictating what gets built, and like basically dictating what are the laws to construction, you get these very sort of messy compositions where building heights are different. I think to some extent, no, I don't think so. The idea of having right angles is only present here in this specific section, like here, 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 and here. But you zoom out, and that composition is like gone. Although it's just one way to create a quote unquote beautiful composition. Because as we stated earlier, Hill Street is also like very irregular. Hill Street looks good from the point of view of the pedestrian, and this part of Ayala, at least in this section, would look good, but the building heights aren't regulated. There is no sidewalk, no clear walking path, and this is really just a street for the cars. So again, you have sidewalks here, but it's gone. On this side, we have some kind of sidewalks, and you have the open canal here, which adds to like the smell factor. You have your meters over here just exposed, and of course, like just empty walls. Although that's present in steep hill as well, so that's not entirely bad. You have the fences that look very like stay away from my property. So that's what we're hoping to avoid here in your design. So make it look welcoming, make it look like people are supposed to go there, and you can make it look good by applying these principles. So we'll talk about axial compositions and spatial compositions on Monday. And then after that, we'll have a quiz. And then we'll talk about the next part of the book, chapter 4, which is, I can't remember what chapter 4 is. Let me check. Chapter 4 is finally the square or the plaza. Probably like the most prominent or the biggest public space in like any sort of well-developed city. So this is an example of a square or plaza with a sort of fountain. And then again, as we described last week or 2 weeks ago, another example of the square is or plaza is St. Peter's Square or St. Peter's Plaza. So we go over this. So a plaza is basically a wide open space for like pedestrians, for them to walk around in, experience the space, and yeah. And then it doesn't have to be 320 by 240 meters wide. It can even be smaller, like 100 by 100. That's also a good plaza. A good plaza in Cebu City, just for like your reference, would be, let's see, Capital. And then this technically is a plaza space over here. And the only thing that sort of kind of makes it unattractive is that there's nothing to do here. Whereas, for example, here in Rome, the building itself becomes like the destination point, the highlight of the space. Where in Capital, the building is kind of there, but the plaza is surrounded by parks, and the parks don't really let you do anything. There's nothing to do here except like maybe take pictures. And because the composition, the park itself isn't very interesting, nobody goes there. So it might be unfair to compare it to St. Peter's Square, which is like the center of the Christian world, but something should have been done or should be done with the space around Capital to make it more lively, to make people want to visit, and not just those who like need to file their taxes and stuff. Okay, so it's 4 o'clock. I'll stop presenting here. We'll continue the discussion on Monday.